And Jim, take it away.
Good morning. I'm Jim Spencer. I am with the Bluefield West Virginia Economic Development Authority, and we're proud today to have a HUBZone Training 101, which will be followed up next Wednesday with HUBZone Training 102. I think that a lot of the programs, some of our small businesses in West Virginia don't take advantage of it because they don't know as much about it or how it could relate directly to their business. And we're pleased that Mr. George Murray, the Deputy Director for the state of West Virginia with SBA, is going to be teaching today. I've had the privilege of meeting George a few years ago. Very dynamic, great resume, and has actually helped to grow this program in West Virginia. So today he's going to talk about how to grow this program for small business in the Bluefield region. So George, thank you very much. And if you don't mind, for the attendees, follow us on mybluefield.org for other training classes we host. And if there's something that you need that we're not providing, please let us know. George, take it away.
Thanks, Jim. I am glad to be here. So let me get my slides going here. And wrong file. Sorry about that. There we go. So I am glad to be here this morning. I'm glad to go over some of the details of the HUBZone program with you all, just to be able to hopefully encourage you to get some information about the program. If you're
George,
interested,
can I interrupt you for just a second? We're seeing your notes slide. If you could hit, I think it's display settings right there at the top.
Okay, hang on. Let me do. Okay, let me get out of this and try. I apologize for this.
No worries.
Is that better?
It does the same thing, but I think if you go right up to the top where it says display settings.
Okay.
I know that's this new feature. Yeah, swap presenter and viewer view. Let's see if that changes. There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. So what we're going to do today is go over just the basics of the HUBZone program. For those of you who are interested in pursuing federal government contracts, I know Mary Hedrick from RCAC did a presentation on Government Contracting 101 to go over just sort of the basics of what federal contracting is all about. As a result of that, there were some questions about becoming HUBZone certified. The HUBZone program is a formal certification from the SBA, and it's designed to assist companies in the pursuit of federal government contracts. So the reason that we're doing two parts with this today is really kind of the nuts and bolts of the program, what it's about, the eligibility, how to apply, some of the the ins and outs of the program itself. And then next week, when we get into HUBZone 102, that'll get into more, how do you use the certification? How can it really be used to grow federal contracting for your business? So here in West Virginia, I came to West Virginia in 2016 to become the deputy director. I've been in federal contracting for about 25 years overall. So I've got a lot of experience in this. But HUBZone became one of my focal points when I came here. When I started, we had 23 firms in our HUBZone portfolio in the state, and they were generating about $10.4 million a year in fiscal year 2016. As of the end of fiscal year 20, which ended last September 30th, which is the last full year of data that we have, we had over 48 million in HUBZone contract dollars coming into the state, and we had about 65 firms that were certified. Through COVID, as of today, we've got 62 firms. We have lost a couple of companies for various reasons, but we still have a good, strong portfolio, and looking to grow that and to help things grow even further. So what's the program about? The program was established in '97. First company was certified in '99. but it's to be able to help businesses that are in what we call historically underutilized business zones. That's what HUBZone stands for. Hub zones are generally economically depressed areas. So generally areas of high unemployment and lower income that's part of the criteria for establishing hub zones. It's based on data that we get from other sources. But the premise behind the program is that companies that are based in these areas, if they can win federal government contracts using the contracts as the incentive, that helps the businesses to grow. Because the businesses grow, they're going to need to hire employees. So if they're hiring from within their general area, also within the hub zone, then that high unemployment rate begins to go down. That low income rate starts to go up because people now have jobs, steady income, steady paychecks, and they then start investing in the community because they start spending those paychecks in the local community. And so that helps the overall community to be able to grow and become more prosperous. So that's really the thought process behind the program and what the program purpose is. So to be eligible for the program, to go over some of the details, have to be a small by federal standards. Generally for manufacturing firms, that's 500 employees or fewer. We're going to look at the last 12 months of employment, average per month of 500 or fewer, you're a small business. There are some exceptions to that where the size standard number can actually be higher than that, depending on the product that's being manufactured. For services and construction, we're looking at revenue, and we're going to look at the annual revenue of the business for the last 5 years. The smallest of those size standards generally starts around 7 million, can go up to close to 40 million per year on average. Again, just depends on the industry that company is in. So have to be a small business. Company has to be at least 51% owned by US citizens. And then there are some other groups out there, Indian tribal governments, ANCs, Native Hawaiian organizations, community development corporations. All of those have some special rules. In the 13, 14 years that I've been teaching this program, I've run into 2 of those that were interested in HUBZone certification. Most of the overwhelming majority of companies that I work with, it's owned by US citizens. The third eligibility criteria is the principal office. And this is where things start to get a little bit tricky. The principal office has to be in a hub zone, but principal office does not necessarily mean the headquarters of the business. We're looking at a company facility at which the greatest number of employees perform the work. So if the company only has one facility, that location has to be in a hub zone. But if the company has multiple facilities, it's going to be where the greatest number of employees are. So if it's a manufacturing firm and the manufacturing facility is one location, administrative offices are another location, since generally the majority of the employees are going to be at the manufacturing location, it would need to be that location that would be in the hub zone, even though the headquarters administrative functions may be at a different location. The other part that gets confusing with this is, again, we're looking at company facilities. So if it's let's say, a janitorium where the employees are going out to the job site to perform their job, that's where most of the work is done. The work is not being done at the company facility. For that, we're looking at which employees actually report to the company facility to be able to determine if that is in a hub zone and eligible for the program or not. And then the last eligibility criteria is at least 35% of the employees of the company have to live within a hub zone. And for that, we're looking at all of the employees. So if it's that janitorial firm and there are employees that go out to the job site, they're still looked at as part of the 35%. If we're talking about that manufacturing firm with 2 facilities, we're talking about the employees of both facilities. So it's all of the company employees, at least 35% need to live within a hub zone. And that 35% number is rigid. That is in statute. we can't make any exceptions for that. So where are the hub zones? There are 22,000 across the country. You can find the map at maps.certify.sba.gov. That is the official map tool for the program. For the purposes of this presentation, I actually just put in a search for Bluefield, West Virginia, to be able to give you an idea of where the hub zones are, the hub zone areas are in and around Bluefield. As you are looking at the program, you're going to want to put in a street address and get it down to the street address for both the principal office and for the employees to know if they are in a hub zone or not. But there are different types of hub zones. So there's 7 in total right now. The majority of them are going to be census tract, and that's generally, if the Census Bureau determines that it is a metropolitan area, and that area qualifies for low-income housing tax credit. Those are the areas that are sort of in that blue. When you see the red areas, that is county based, and those are non-metropolitan areas where we're looking at both the unemployment rate and or the income rate. If the unemployment rate is 140% of either the state or the national average, whichever is lower, or if the median income, median household income is 80% or below of the national average, then the entire county can be HUBZone qualified. Then some of the other areas, Indian reservations can qualify. Difficult development areas are outside the continental U.S. Those are some of the territories, and a state like Hawaii, Alaska, where they're not part of the continental U.S. And just because they're not connected to the U.S. directly, it can be a little more difficult to do business in those areas. So they can qualify. Areas that were closed under base realignment and the Base Realignment and Closure Act, military bases that were closed and or realigned. The county in which that base was located can be qualified, as well in some instances of some of the contiguous counties for where that base is located. Areas in which there was a federally declared disaster. In certain instances, those areas can be HUBZone qualified. Those are the main areas. And we're going to be talking about the 7th, the government designated areas, in just a little bit. So, but most of the areas are going to be either the census tract or the county. So again, why are we doing all of this? The primary benefit for HUBZone certification is the pursuit of federal government contracts. Within the $500 billion or so that the federal government spends every year, there are some goals for agencies. 23% of federal contract dollars are supposed to go to small businesses. For fiscal year 20, where the results were just released, we were actually over 25%. So that's a good thing. Then within that, 5% to small disadvantaged business, 5% to women-owned small business, 3% to service disabled veteran-owned small business, and 3% to HUBZone small businesses. 3% of roughly $500 billion every year is a lot of money. And HUBZone is the only one of these goals that has never been met. There's a variety of reasons for that. We're going to be talking about that in just a little bit in terms of how the program has changed to be able to make it easier for that goal to be met from both the business side as well as from the federal agency side. So the benefits of the program, again, it's primarily contracts. So 100% set aside as well as partial set asides. Contracting officers, as they go through their process, operate off of what we call the rule of 2. So if they know that there are at least 2 small businesses with that particular certification, they can reserve that contract for competition only among businesses with that certification. So if they know that there are 2 HUBZone small businesses out there, HUBZone certified small businesses that can perform on that contract, get the job done for them, they can reserve it as a HUBZone set aside. That's really the biggest benefit, because you have the opportunity to pursue a contract and limit the competition, because there's, It's only businesses with that certification that can compete. Nationally, we've got round numbers, 5,000 firms in the portfolio, in the HUBZone portfolio. You break that down by industry, you break that down by geography, and competition can be very limited very quickly. So that, it can be a powerful benefit to participate in the program and be able to utilize that particular benefit of the program. And this is where we're going to get into some of the information in the next session to be able to understand how to better utilize that, because for a lot of businesses, they get HUBZone certified, and they think, oh, this is going to be great. Let me see what HUBZone set-asides come out. And they sit back and they look and they wait and they look and they wait, and they can't find these set-asides, and they get frustrated. But again, it starts with the contracting officer knowing who can get the job done. So part of this is your ability to market yourself to these contracting offices so that they know who you are before they put the solicitation out on the street. And again, that's a lot of what we're going to be covering in the next session. Sole source awards are also possible. Sole source means that the contracting office negotiates one-on-one with the business. So there's no competition, at least no competition in price. Again, the contracting office needs in order to utilize this. Generally, what they're going to do when they start their market research, if they can only find one small business to do the work, and that small business is HUBZone certified, they can use the sole source process. Because if they negotiate one-on-one with that small business, generally they're going to get a better price than if they compete it and have large businesses part of that. Why take the time to go through the whole process only to know that that small business is probably going to be the one winning the contract anyway? So let me negotiate with that business one-on-one. But if they do their research and there's only one HUBZone small business, but there are other small businesses who can do the work, probably they're going to compete it as a small business set aside, going back to that rule of two, because they know that there are multiple small businesses, though they can compete it among those small businesses overall. The HUBZone firm is still going to be eligible because they're still a small business. Full and open competition with the price evaluation preference. That benefit means that the contracting officer isn't sure if that small business can do the job. They think they might be able to, they're not totally sure. So what they do is they put it out for full and open competition. Anyone can submit a bid, so the large businesses will be bidding on it. But when those large businesses submit their bids, 10% is added to their bid price. If that HUBZone business comes in as the low bidder, after 10% is added to all the large businesses, that HUBZone business wins the contract. And you'll see in the notes here that if the low bidder is a small business but not HUBZone, the 10% is not added to other small businesses. So that small business would still be the winner, even if 10% would be added to everyone else. And then the last real benefit that's not on the slide is subcontracting, because large businesses are also looking for HUBZone businesses to be a part of their contracts. If the contract is over $750,000 or over $1.5 million, if it's a construction contract, those businesses are required to have the different types of small businesses participating in that contract in their subcontracting plan. So they are also looking for HUBZone businesses to include in their contracts. So there are many businesses who I've worked with who, yes, they've taken advantage of some of the HUBZone set-asides to win some contracts, but they've also taken advantage of using the certification to get more subcontracting work to be able to help some of the large businesses on some of the larger contracts that small businesses can't necessarily do on their own. So what's the application process? It's a little more complicated than what may be on the screen, but it's really not all that difficult. First step is to register in sam.gov. Because this is all about federal contracting, you need to be registered in order to qualify for any federal contracts. So you have to register in sam.gov first. Art Stacy and Mary Hedrick can certainly help with that process should you need it. The second is to pull together the supporting documentation that you're going to need as part of the application. And it's really, what do you need to be able to show you meet the eligibility criteria? So some of it is going to be your payroll records, because we need to be able to see who the employees are. We also need to see how many hours they worked in that pay period, because in order to be considered an employee, the individual must work at least 50 hours per month. So part-time employees, are considered if they work at least 40 hours per month. For the payroll period, we're going to look to see how many hours are part of that payroll period, depending on how long your payroll period may be. If it's a weekly payroll, if someone is less than 40 hours, we're going to ask for the previous payroll period to see if in total they've worked 40 hours. If they still haven't worked 40 hours, we can back, and if it's weekly payrolls, we ask for 4 payroll periods to see if they've worked at least 40 hours, that they've been on that payroll. If it's we can ask for 2 payroll periods to show that they've worked at least 40 hours. If it's a monthly payroll, the payroll, it really depends on how you run your payroll. We're not going to dictate that to you, but we can go back to determine, did that individual work at least 40 hours, in that month or month equivalent to qualify as an employee of the company for HUB's purposes. Also part of that is we need proof of residency. So for that 35% of the employees who live in a HUB zone, we need to know that they live in the HUB zone. So we're going to be asking for generally it's going to be a valid driver's license or a voter registration card. In lieu of that, they can supply a utility bill and a signed statement ascertaining that this is their current location based on the current utility bill. So that we do need to be able to get some documentation from the employee that you're going to need to pull together. Proof of ownership, that's going to be your corporate documents. Depending on your business structure, the specific documents may change, but we need to be able to know who owns the company. And then for the proof of citizenship, because at least 51% of the company needs to be at least 51% owned by a U.S. citizen. So we also want to be able to see that proof of citizenship, which is going to be either a birth certificate, copy of a birth certificate, unexpired passport, or naturalization papers. And that's going to be a requirement as part of that. And then proof of the principal location, that company facility that's in the HUB zone. We're going to need to see a lease, a deed, something that shows that's where the business is actually located. The reason that is step 2 in the process to pull all of that together is when you go to sba.gov/HUBZone to apply, the application itself is electronic. It's relatively straightforward. It's basically facts about the company. You're going to put in the company name and address, phone number, point of contact, a little bit about what the business does, answer some questions related to HUBZone certification, but it's relatively straightforward. If you print it out, it's about 3 pages long. It doesn't take that long to fill out. But once you submit the application and you authorize that application as a security check that says you're the one who is actually submitting on behalf of the company. Once you submit that, you will have 3 days to submit the supporting documentation. You've got 72 hours. So you want to make sure that you're pulling all of that together before you submit the electronic application, because if you submit the electronic application and you don't get the support document in there, then the application is going to be returned to you and you're going to need to start over again. So just to make the process easier, pull the documentation together. There is a checklist that is on that website, sba.gov/HUBZone. Again, depending on the type of business structure that you have, that can help walk you through a little bit more of the specifics of what documents may be needed. So there happened to the program in the last year or so. The regulatory changes were actually published last January of 2020. They were scheduled to go into effect. It was either 60 days or 90 days after those rules were published. And then, of course, COVID started. So because COVID started, some of these rules were more slowly implemented. Some were put on hold. Some were actually implemented, but we just didn't have the opportunity to really publicize it. So this part is just to go over some of the changes to the program to make it easier for both businesses and for contracting offices to be able to utilize the program. So some of the challenges, businesses found the program difficult to use and to be able to maintain their eligibility. The agencies still as yet haven't met the 3% goal. And then from a community standpoint, it's difficult to be able to publicize the program and encourage the use of the program, even just within the community, because of some of the difficulties that are there. Some businesses have found success, others haven't. I've worked with communities before that have tried to get some of these regulatory changes made long ago, just because of the nature of their particular community made it difficult for companies to get and maintain the certification. So because of these challenges, we've made quite a number of changes to the program. So the first thing that we did was we stabilized the maps. As I mentioned, some of the reason for areas being HUBZone qualified is based on unemployment and income data. Well, the income data we get from the Census Bureau. That changes every 10 years. The unemployment data we get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That can change every year. So prior to some of these regulatory changes, there could be a company that gets certified because they're in a non-metropolitan county. They get the certification, and 6 months later, because if that county was qualified based on unemployment rate, because that 140%, if that county dipped below 140%, the next year, that county may not be qualified for HUBZone. So all of a sudden, this company that just jumped through all these hoops to get the certification is being decertified because the area where their principal office is located is no longer HUBZone qualified. And then the year after that, that same county, if the unemployment rate goes up a little bit more, can be qualified again. So they start jumping through hoops again. Obviously, that creates a lot of frustration on behalf of businesses. So what has happened is the maps are currently frozen until June 30th, 2023, because that's when by then we will have the results of the 2020 census. We'll be able to implement that and update the maps by that point. Once the maps are updated, they will be frozen for 5 years. There may be areas added that I'm going to talk about in just a second, but the areas that are HUBZone qualified will remain HUBZone qualified for a period of 5 years. So expanding into rural areas, the next piece of this, this is the 7th area, the governor designated areas. And again, this is a new part of the regulations. So for more rural communities, population of 50,000 or less, where unemployment is 120% of the state or US average, whichever is lower. So it's not quite qualified for standard HUBZone, but still unemployment is higher. A state governor can request of the SBA to have those areas added as HUBZone areas. Now, there's some caveats to that. It's not that the governor just says, hey, here's a list of areas, add them to the HUBZone portfolio. There needs to be some other economic justification that's part of that. So the governor or the governor's office need to be able to say, we've got economic development going on in this area. These are some of the things that are going on. That's why opportunity zones are encouraged, because opportunity zones are also areas where there could be some economic development happening. So by demonstrating that there's economic development happening within those areas, that can be the justification for the SBA to use some of these more relaxed rules and include those areas within the HUBZone program. One of the other caveats is that of the areas within the state, only 10% of the eligible areas can be requested in any given year. The governor can make one request per year to the SBA. So again, it's not that the governor can take, the list of all of the communities that are eligible and say, please add them. It's going to be limited to 10% of those areas in any given year. Another major change, and again, this goes back to these businesses where the area in which their business is located all of a sudden isn't HUBZone qualified anymore. If the business invests in that area, they purchase the building in which their business is located, or they enter into a long-term lease, which is defined as 10 years or longer, that they can keep their HUBZone certification for up to 10 years, even if that area changes, if it is no longer HUBZone qualified. So going back to the example that I used before, where the county may change every year. Again, the maps are now frozen for 5 years, but even after that 5-year period, if that area is no longer HUBZone qualified, then that business can keep its HUBZone certification for up to 10 years. And the reason is, we don't want to penalize the business. They've invested in the community. They're trying to help that community grow, help the economy grow. We want to be able to incentivize that rather than punish the business and say, oops, your area is no longer HUBZone qualified, therefore we're going to remove your HUBZone certification. The second bullet there with the redesignated areas, there is a period of 3 years built into the program, so that if an area does change, where it's no longer HUBZone qualified, it is redesignated for a 3-year period. So if I'm a HUBZone business, or if I'm applying to become a HUBZone business, the area where my business is located is already a redesignated area. That means technically it doesn't qualify. It's already outgrown that status. So for that, I won't be able, if I invest in that community, it won't qualify for this 10-year time frame. Ways that we're trying to increase the program utilization, just from, again, from both the business and the contracting office standpoint. One of the other changes is that firms need to recertify annually. Previously, firms recertified every 3 years. But now the certification is really just the annual recertification is a 1-page, I attest that I meet the eligibility, I continue to meet the eligibility of the eligibility criteria of the program under penalty of perjury, and I sign off on it. And so long as I sign off on it, I've recertified. The full document recertification will still happen generally on a 3-year rotating basis, where the SBA will review all the documents to ensure that the company remains eligible for the program. The reason that this becomes such a big deal comes to the next part, the contract verification. Part of the reason that contracting officers were hesitant to use the HUBZone program is that it's the only program in which the business needed to be certified twice as part of the contract. They needed to be eligible at the time that they submitted their bid, and they needed to be eligible at the time of contract award. For a contracting officer, that's a lot of extra work. I need to jump through some hoops, talk to the SBA, make sure on both ends that the firm is eligible for the contract. This is the only program in which this was happening. Now, because the business recertifies once a year, every year, it doesn't really matter when the bids are submitted and when the contract is awarded. Because the business is going to be recertified on an annual basis, the SBA can say, on that rolling basis, doesn't matter what the date is, yes, this firm has recertified. Firm doesn't recertify, then it's easy enough for the SBA to look and within the system and say they didn't recertify, therefore they're not certified at one time or the other. So it makes it easier for everyone to be able to utilize the program. And then the last couple of bullets here, the other complaint for businesses is maintaining that 35% employment. If I have 10 people in my business, 4 of them need to live in a hub zone in order for me to qualify for that 35%. I'm working on a hub zone contract. 1 person leaves the business. Now I'm down to 3 out of 9. Well, that brings me down below 33%. What do I do? Does that mean I'm going to lose my contract? Does that mean, I'm going to be decertified from the program? Well, the new regulations have clarified that so long as you have at least 20%, there are no changes. 20% of your employees need to live in a hub zone. You still need to get above that 35% before you recertify. So you need to continue to work on it, but it's not going to impact your contract. Again, it helps the contracting officers, because if a business falls below the 35% and the SBA says something, now from a contracting officer, what does that mean for me? Does that mean I have to terminate the contract because they're no longer HUBZone qualified? I have to jump through a whole lot of hoops in order to make things happen. So the last of the changes in this section that we're going to go over is the residency requirement again. Again, a lot of businesses would complain, I've got some really good employees. I get into the program. I start growing the business. I want to promote those good employees because I'm bringing on more people. So I want to, give them more leadership role. They've been, been with me. They've been loyal to me. So I want to be able to provide them with some benefits. I want to, help them grow with the company. That's a good thing. As an employer, I want to be able to do that. However, as I begin to promote them and give them raises, they start to move. They want to move into a better neighborhood. They want to get a bigger house. They want to be able to provide more for their families as well. Well, they move out of a hub zone area. They were one of my hub zone employees. Now, all of a sudden, I may be falling below that 35%. What do I do? With this new regulation, if an employee lived in a hub zone area for at least 6 months prior to the certification or recertification, and they continue to live within that hub zone for at least 6 months after that certification or recertification, they have that 1-year time frame. Then after that 1-year time frame is up, they can move anywhere they want. And so long as there is continuous service with the business, so they haven't been laid off, they didn't quit, they weren't fired, continuous service with the business, it doesn't matter where they move to, they will be considered a HUBZone employee. They will count towards that 35%. This is one of the biggest complaints that I have heard over my years in working with the program is it's so hard to maintain that 35% because, as employees move, not only, is it more of a burden on me because I got to track where all these employees are and make sure that they're, that they're still in a hub zone. If they're not, I have to, try to get other people so that I can maintain the 35%. Makes it very difficult for me as an employer. So with this, it streamlines that process, makes it far easier. And it's also good for the employees because then they can, they can move to wherever is going to be best for them and for their families. And it's not going to impact the HUBZone certification of their business. These are just some references for the program, where the program was created in statute, where the regulations are located, the size regulations that I had referenced earlier, some more information about the governor designated areas, and then the final rule for the some of these changes. Some of the other small business programs. We've got the 8A business program, business development program. That is as close as the federal government gets to a minority certification. If the company is at least 51% owned and controlled by an individual who is both socially and economically disadvantaged. And there's some other criteria that go along with that, but they may qualify for the 8A business development program. For social disadvantage, there are 5 ethnic groups that are presumed to be socially disadvantaged. That's African American, Native American, Hispanic American, Asian Pacific American, Subcontinent Asian American are socially disadvantaged. Other people can be considered socially disadvantaged if they can demonstrate that they've been discriminated against on the basis of a stereotype. And then if they're socially disadvantaged, if they're also economically disadvantaged, which means their adjusted net worth is $750,000 or below, they can qualify for the 8A program. We just talked about the HUBZone program. The service-disabled veteran-owned small business program currently is a self-certification in the federal government, except for the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA requires a verification of that because their goal for service-disabled veteran-owned small business is much higher than 3% for the national average. So they want to verify that businesses are legitimate before they award those contracts. That will soon be changing as part of the latest National Defense Authorization Act. That program is going to be moving from the VA to the SBA. Service-disabled vet will become a formal certification sometime within the next couple of years, when the legislation required that function move to the SBA within a 2-year time frame. And then the woman-owned small business set-aside program is currently also a formal certification as of last fall. So at some point, all four will be formal certifications where businesses will be submitting to the SBA and getting that certification from the SBA that they hold that certification. But you see, there is no order of precedence among the programs. That means that contracting officers don't say, oh, we have to look at this program first, that program first. Again, the only exception is the VA. They do have the authority to look at veteran and service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses before any others. And that's based on a specific piece of legislation. But outside of that, all programs are fair game. So the way that contracting officers determine which program to use, it starts with market research. They need to know who is out there, what companies can provide the programs, products and services that they need for their agency. So they start with market research. Because they're starting with market research, you as a small business owner, that's what you should be doing too. That's what we're going to be covering next time. How do they, if they're starting with market research to be able to determine who's out there, how can you help them with that by doing your own market research, knowing who's buying the products and services that you want to sell, and then reaching out to them first, because that makes their market research that much easier because they already know that you're out there. They know who you are and what you can do. So just to give quick, as we finish up with this, a quick overview of the SBA and what we do on an everyday basis. Free business counseling is through our resource partners, small business development centers, and Harold Patterson is the SBDC coach who I know works very closely with Jim and the folks here in Bluefield. But outside of the SBDC, we also have SCORE, the West Virginia SCORE chapter. We have a women's business center that covers the state of West Virginia, and a veterans business outreach center. The VBOC for West Virginia is actually based in the Virginia Beach area in Virginia, but West Virginia is part of their territory. All provide very similar types of programs and services. It's free business counseling, low-cost training for businesses, but they're there to be able to help whether the business is starting, growing, expanding, needing financing. They're there to be able to work with those businesses and get some resources that they need. We also provide guaranteed business loans. So as a small business goes to the bank, if the bank is not willing to provide financing on a traditional term, based on a standard loan program that they have, they can come to the SBA and request a guarantee. And we can guarantee a portion of what the business would owe to the bank should they default on the loan. That takes the risk away from the bank's perspective and enables that borrower to be more attractive and get that funding. It may be a little more expensive than a standard loan, but the bank does need to certify to the SBA that they're not willing to provide that financing without the guarantee. So it's a way for businesses to get the financing when they ordinarily wouldn't be able to. Whenever there is a natural disaster, a federally declared disaster, the SBA becomes the federal government's bank. So we provide home and business disaster loans for home loans and physical we call them physical disaster loans for counties that were directly impacted by the disaster itself. And then the economic injury disaster loan is something that can help businesses that were impacted that weren't directly impacted by by that particular disaster, but may have been indirectly impacted because their customers were directly impacted. And so we provide some financing there, low interest loans for those businesses to be able to sustain through the disaster. And then the last area that we work in the district office is in federal government contracting. We teach small businesses the process for federal contracting, go through these certification programs as we have for the HUBZone program today. And then what we've really been doing for the last year and a half is the COVID relief programs. So the Paycheck Protection Program was sort of the flagship COVID program. We're currently working through the forgiveness portion of that, working with both lenders and borrowers on how those loans can be forgiven. The COVID economic injury disaster loan is still available. That will end on December 31st of this year. We are actually teaching workshops on a weekly basis on how that program works for folks that are interested in learning more. If you go to sba.gov/WV, you can find out more about that, about all of the workshops that we teach. But you can sign up to register for that workshop on again, it's the same workshop we teach every week to be able to get more information if that's something that your business may need. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that program has currently ended as funds have been depleted. But that was another program that we ran to be able to help businesses in the restaurant industry, whether it was restaurants, caterers, food trucks, distilleries, breweries. A lot of types of businesses were included with that, but we helped provide grant funds to those businesses to be able to get them some funding to be able to continue and either reopen or pay some back expenses, different things that they may need for their business. And then the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant was another grant program that that is actually still operating. There's still some limited funds available if eligible business want to submit for that. But that is really for the live performing arts, venues that host live performing arts. It could also be promoters of those programs, could be eligible to be able to get those grant funds, again, to help them, sustain through the COVID disaster. And that is really the end of my presentation. This is my contact information, my phone number, my email address, again, our district office website, sba.gov/WV. You can also sign up for updates that we send out on a regular basis. If you go to sba.gov/updates, you can input an email address and you'll receive the notifications that we send out with all of our programs going on. And if you're on Twitter, you can follow us. SBA_WV is our handle. And again, it's got lots of updates and information on our programs. And with that, Jim, I will turn it back over to you.
George, thank you very much. We appreciate you being with us and taking the time to explain this. Faith, do we have any questions in the chat? I don't think so.
We have no questions in the chat, but I am going to make a note that I will be sending out a survey link to those that registered. And if you're watching this video on YouTube, that survey link will be in the body of the description. If you could please take that survey, we would greatly appreciate it.
George, again, thank you. We appreciate it and look forward to next week. Same time, I think it's 11 o'clock on Wednesday for HUBZone 102.
It's my pleasure. Anyone, if there's anything more that I can do, in the meantime, just let me know.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good day.